Okay, continuing on in Hilchos Torah Daled. We're going to review all the halachos we did last time, which are 3 of these halachos, and then we answered some questions and didn't answer others. So we'll approach it fresh because it's been 2 days. Harav shalimid v'lo hivino talmidim. A Rav who taught and the students did not understand. We just started reviewing. Lo yichos alehen v'yirgas. He should not be angry or enraged at them. Ella choser v'shona hadavar afilu kama pamim. Rather, he should go back and teach the thing even many times. Until they understand the depth of the halacha. So too, the student should not say, I understood, but when he didn't understand. Rather, he should go back and ask even many times. And if his Rav got angry, and again, I don't know the difference between kas and ragas. I kind of want to say kas means to feel angry and ragas means to like rage at someone. I don't know if that's just a guess. Then he should say, Rebbe, you know what?
I said it feels right.
Yeah, there's something I think later on that leads me to believe that. Yeah. So anyway,
it seems like the way they say if he gets angry and his ragas.
Yeah. I think you'll see later on. I think there's a support. He should say, Rebbe, it is Torah, and I need to learn, and my mind is deficient. Okay, so we're going to read all of them first, but let's just pause and ask the questions here. So our question is, I mean, we didn't ask this question last time, but like, what's the havamina? Like, that it's okay to get angry and not teach it more times? You know, like it's just, you know, first of all, the angry thing is the weirdest thing. I mean, it sounds like this is Rambam shouldn't need to say he should not get angry. That's already in Hilchos Deos. You should never get angry for any reason, you know. Avodah Zarah, right? Which is the only thing you should be angry at. Yeah. Because God's angry at Avodah Zarah, right? But what's the havamina that he shouldn't go back and teach the thing many times? I mean, that's a little weird. And I even saw, I was looking through the let me share the whole screen here. We don't necessarily need to go into the Gemaras, but I was looking at the Rambam source, and the Gemara brings it down as a limud. Amar Rabbi this is in Chavurah Nun Dalet Amud. Oh, that's why I opened the notepad. Hold on. Chavurah Daf Nun Dalet Amud Beis. Yeah. Okay. So Rabbi Kiva Omer minayin shechayev adam l'shanus l'talmido ad sheyilamdenu. From where do we know that a person is obligated to teach his student until he learns it? Shnemar, and l'shanos, I guess, is you could translate that as to repeat. Okay, I think that actually is a better translation here. Let's see how the Scheinzold says it. No, he doesn't even translate it. How does the English translate it? Show it. No. Oh, was that earlier? Yeah. Teach. Yeah. Fine. All right. Fine. So, from where do you know that? It says in Dvarim, the full pasuk is "V'ata kisvu lechem es hashir azos v'lamdah es bnei Yisrael," and teach it to bnei Yisrael. Okay, and then it says uminayin ad sedur b'fihem. How do we know that you have to do it until it is arranged in their mouth? Shneimar says simah b'fihem, place it in their mouths. So I just think the whole concept is weird. Like, isn't that what a teacher's job is to teach and to teach? And if you're not teaching, then you didn't do your job. Like, so it's just yeah.
I think there's like a trade-off that this is really like talking about
Mm-hmm.
addressing. Like, let's say you have a class of 100 students.
Right.
Which I think that's a lot of different. So like, you know, you have a class of a lot of people,
Mm-hmm.
and you have one student who's like persistent about like not understanding.
Right.
So there's a feeling of we should move on for the rest of the students, because this like this one student is holding everyone else up. Right.
So we brought that possibility up last time and said that it does seem like based on like from a purely like efficacy standpoint that there are two extremes that are both bad. meaning it would be bad if the teacher only taught stuff once and refused to repeat and clarify stuff. But we've all been in situations where the teacher holds up the class for one person, and that seems to be bad as a general policy. Now, not that this is necessarily like addressing when this should be done. Like maybe this would also include the teacher saying like, I'm going to move on now, but I'll go back and help you with this later. Yeah. But either way, the Havmina is going to be weird or the Maskana is going to be weird, because if you say the Maskana means he should hold up the class and teach this one guy, then that's also strange. Yeah. We won't answer the questions yet, just going on though. Also, a student shouldn't say, I understand when he didn't understand, and rather he should go back and ask many times. So there you could also say, the Havmina is that he shouldn't hold up the class just because he doesn't understand. Maskana is no, he should ask. But the question again is, what's the limit here? Like what if you are mismatched and everyone else around you is like, more advanced than you? So should you really is it really right for you to monopolize the shiur for something that is your deficiency? And then what's the deal here? If the Rav got mad at him, then this is what he should say. So our question was like, how, what mentality leads the Rav to get angry? And then how does this address that mentality? Okay, so those are our questions on that first paragraph, but we got to go on now to review. Lo yihye hatalmid bosh mechaverav shalamdu mipam rishona oshnia. A student should not be ashamed from his friends who learned it from the first or second time. But he was slower. He only learned it after many times. If he is embarrassed about this thing, it turns out he'll go in and out of the base midrash without learning anything. Therefore, the Chachamim Harishonim said, an embarrassed person doesn't learn, and short-tempered person can't teach. Yeah. Okay, but when does this apply? That's when the students didn't understand the matter because of its depth, or because of their mind's shallowness, right? Of their deficient mind. But if the Rav, if it is discernible to the Rav that the students are lax with divrei Torah and misrapin alehen, misrapin alehen. Misrash was like lazy and misrapin is lax. Lefikach lohivino, and therefore they didn't understand chayev. So this is the phrase, Isaac, that I said. Chayev lirgos alehen. Saying chayev lichos doesn't really make sense because you can't command an emotion. But chayev lirgos, he's chayev to rage at his students, meaning in action. I think that's why I was translating roges as to like express anger. Ulahachliman b'dvarim, and to shame them verbally, kadei lachadadan, in order to sharpen them. And the sages about this, the sages said, cast bitterness or vitriol into the vitriol, into the students. Yeah. So there we said. So we wondered last time, how can this work? Like if you're worried about your Rav flying into a rage, then that's going to make you, not want to ask. But then we said if your Rav is doing this consistently, where he's very, very patient when you are not understanding because it's too difficult, but then when he is very mocky when he sees that you're not paying attention or you're being lax, so then it could work out. But the question is, so I think this one we did understand last time. I don't think there's any other problems on this one. But we did say, I guess, what is the idea of shaming them in order to sharpen them? That's also weird. Kedei l'chadadan seems to be presented here as the opposite of Shehim Misrashlim Divrei Torah or Misrapin Alehen. That's weird. Sharpening, I think of as a intellectual thing, like we just read that in Mishlei this morning about the even a small Talmid can be mechaded the Rav through his questions, so that's like, sharpening in terms of understanding. So I don't understand how shaming them can sharpen them.
It might be that it'll I think the direct consequence is that they'll put more effort in, and then that's going to make them sharper. Right.
That's one possibility,
and then if they're sharper because of that, then they're not going to be confused. But it's the opposite of the case. aren't sharp enough to get it, which is because of their own laziness.
Mhm.
And so this is going to make them sharp.
Right. Yeah, that's definitely a possibility. Another possibility I have is that it could be that yesterday we said misrapin alehen. We used the phrase. We said that that's the phrase the Rambam used about like learning amid delicacies and eating and drinking. But it could be just from context that it means that they are lazy in the sense that they're not being precise, and therefore they need to be shamed into precision. Like not that I use shame in this way, but well, okay, I'll give two things. I'll give personal practice and then like what do you call expert teaching advice. So there's a I'll start with the expert teaching advice. Is that there's this book that did like not a meta study, because this is not like peer reviewed or anything, but like a meta analysis of like many top teachers throughout America, like by objective standards of like test scores or whatever, however objective it is. And like ask them what their practices were, and then they compiled this book that has like all their best practices. So one of the best practices, I forgot what the like catchy name is, but it was like insisting on 100%, which is that you should not reward a student for getting something like 95% correct and then moving on. Like if they get it almost correct, if you push them to like you obviously acknowledge that they got something 95%, but you push them to like, okay, that last thing, can you say it better? Like that last thing, that will actually push the student to develop more. Whereas if you reward them for getting it mostly right, that'll just reinforce laziness and bad habits. So as a teaching practice, that's good. Then in my personal practice, I don't know if you've noticed this, I translate everything every time. It's rare that I will read something in Hebrew and not translate it. And I think chavrusas are particularly prone to falling into that trap of not translating. And what happens is you end up, let's say you read something and you're not so sure about it, but you hope your chavrusa won't notice, so you just don't translate it, and like it can lead to gaps in your understanding, or you'll be understanding it one way and they'll understand it another way, or you will be working with a nuance and they won't be working with a nuance. So because English is our native language, then we should translate it like every time, unless you know for sure that you know exactly what the translation is. Like I don't need to translate Shema Yisrael with my chavrusa anymore, but when we're reading a commentary, I translate everything, even though my chavrusa is very good at translation, because we might disagree on the translation. So I think it could be that kind of misrashlim b'divrei Torah, is like they're not going to the ultimate extent to be absolutely precise in their reading and their translating and their understanding and their like application. So the Rav is doing this. He's creating again, like an ego ideal of you should be absolutely precise. And that's how he's using shame. It's not like a social shame, but he wants to, maybe a better word, he wants to stigmatize that type of laxity and promote a sharpness where they're making sure that it's precise. Yeah.
Yeah. So something that I do with my so that's like, I think it's like the opposite of what you're saying in a good way.
Yeah.
So
you had me alarm for a second. Yeah.
So when we, meaning it's it's the converse of what you're saying.
Okay.
In line with the principle that you're saying.
Yeah.
It's a good practice.
Okay.
So when we're like reading commentaries, so like we'll translate every single word, and like try to be as like literal as possible, like in terms of like the meaning of it.
Yeah.
In a way that makes sense of the sentence, but like if something is like a slightly odd word, like I'll translate it in a way that sounds odd.
Yeah.
Like that calls attention either to my lack of understanding of what the
yeah.
Or
the oddness of the choice. Yeah. Yeah. That's good. I agree that that's a good practice. There's also this Rashi Devarim. What did I say? Vav Zion.
Like the notes.
Yeah. I this is a new practice I'm trying out, which is that instead of going home and then wasting a ton of time trying to remember what sources, I just write it down at the time. This is on, I mean, I'm sure Rashi's quoting Chazal, but on the pasuk V'shinatam levanecha v'dibarta bam. So plain shot is you should teach it to your sons, right? But Rashi, I think that's plain shot, but Rashi says V'shinatam levanecha lashon chidud. It means it's an expression of sharpening. like lishanin. I think that's what it is. Shihum b'chudadin b'ficha. It should be sharp in your mouth. She'im yishalcha adam davar lo teit sarich legamgem ela emor lo miyad. That he shouldn't. If someone asks you for something, he shouldn't need to. There's a great word for legamgem. That like gum game, I feel like is like an onomatopoeia type, like gum, you know. But he shouldn't like not mumble. But what it means is he shouldn't like trip over his words. How do they say it in English here? He shouldn't stammer. Yeah, there's a better word for it, I think. But he should say it to him immediately, you know? So I think that's the type of like chidud that we mean here, that it should be sharp in the mouths of the talmidim. Okay, then we said this last one, lefikach in roi larav linhog kalus rosh bifnei talmidim. It is therefore it's not proper for the rav to behave frivolously in front of the talmidim, v'lo lischok bifneihan, and not to joke in front of them, joke around, v'lo le'echov lishlos imahan, and not to eat and drink with them, kadei shetei emas oleim, so that his dread should be upon them, v'yilmadu mimenu bimhera, and they should learn from him quickly. So we had several questions on this. One is the general question we have on a lot of these things, which is to what extent does this apply now? And if it changed, is that change good, or is it like ba'avonoseno harabim? You know, like for example, we said that nowadays does not seem to be fashionable or acceptable to shame your students, and it seems like that. You know, if you shame them, then it would actually be detrimental to the relationship. You know, I've heard, I didn't say this yesterday, but I've heard stories of like a teacher embarrasses a student in class one time, and then that student is forever closed off to learning from the teacher, you know, or it turns them off to like Judaism, you know. So like it could be really, really bad. Whereas in a culture where this is the norm, like I often use the example of boot camp, you know, where it's normal for the superiors to yell profanities in the faces of the people who are like, you know, the students, and that's like acceptable, then it would be fine. But then the other question we had was, you know, this was Chaim's question, that this last halacha does not seem to be in line with an environment that would promote asking the Rav to repeat himself and saying like, I don't understand. And it would seem to be like, you know, I don't know, at odds with the image of like an eternally patient Rav. So how is that balance? How do you strike that balance, assuming that it should be stricken?
It seems like the way this thing is that the Talmud should be doing their utmost.
Yeah.
But when their utmost isn't good enough, then they should then they should persist. And even if let's say the Rav thinks that it's because they're lax or something like that, they like if they know that they really like, and then it's not because like they're looking to touch or
yeah.
Then they should persist about it, and that's what, and we say that, you know, just like to insist that like he helply gives an answer.
So which question are you answering?
What the balance is.
What the balance is. Okay, right. Meaning that there's responsibility on both sides. The Rav is responsible for making the distinction between situations that warrant raging and situations that don't, which is based on whether he thinks that the Talmud is slacking off. And the Rav is also responsible for not getting angry in a way that is, you know, not getting angry at the student's das ktsara, right? So that's the Rav's double. Oh, and then the nafkamina of that responsibility is he has to teach it many, many times until the student understands, and it has to be sharp. But then the student has a responsibility to not say that they understand when they don't understand, and to ask for clarification. And then when he sees that the Rav is misdiagnosing him, you're saying that's when you should say daiti katsara, you know, Rebbe Torah lilun tzarach, yeah, right. Because I was going to ask what happens when like these two things meet. Meaning, let's say the Rav misdiagnoses the student, and the student says Rebbe Torah lilun tzarach. So it sounds like the ball ends up in the Rav's court, and he should realize, oh, like, you know, that I was wrong, you know, in diagnosing the student that way. Unless the Rav sees that the student is just like making an excuse, you know, yeah. I mean, it takes two to tango,
Yes.
yeah. Right. But we wanted to understand a little bit more also here, like what's the nature of this ema? You know, we said that there's an ema that is produced, that's associated with kavod harav, which is in the later prakim. And then there's the ema of the young students that the Rambam Bekius quotes here about what do you call like, you know, hitting them to make sure that they take things seriously. What's the nature of this ema exactly? And he says, especially v'yilmadu mimenu bimhera. Bimhera is weird. Quickly, like what emphasis on the speed? I mean, is quick just mean that he doesn't need many times?
I think so.
Yeah, I don't know. It's just a weird phrase, weird quality to highlight. I would have said something like,
I guess that, I could say that I've had experiences where I really felt like I didn't understand something, and then because of whatever the situation was, I really apply my mind to it because
you really what?
Applied my mind to
Yeah.
it because whatever the situation was that called for that, which made it that I was able to understand something that was much harder to grasp than I would have thought I'd be able to understand. Further.
Yeah, so that is an interesting thing, like tapping into the reserves phenomenon, where you wouldn't go so far, let's say if it was in your own learning, but because there's this gravitas to your Rav's persona and expectations, then you're gonna push yourself to go even further. Yeah.
Basically, you're aware that you don't understand it, and you're not gonna just let it go. It seems like that's something that the talmidim need to have a characteristic. They're not just gonna let it go if they don't understand it. And they're gonna only ask if they really have exerted themselves and they know that they just don't understand it.
Right. Yeah, that's good. That's good. Yeah, Yosef?
Never mind.
Okay. You sure? Okay. Okay. So did we not explain something earlier that we need to explain?
The balance of moving forward or not. I think
with the shiur, you mean?
Yeah.
Yeah.
So I think it seems to me like the way that the Rambam's doing it, the balance is all the way on the side of you just keep doing it until Talmud understands it. And I think the thing is that if Talmud is really going to be if all the talmidim are going to be exerting themselves to the utmost to understand it, then you're going to have a lot fewer of these types of situations where someone doesn't understand it after multiple times. And I think when there is a lot of repeated asking, then that means that there's something that's actually unclear.
Right, but what about the question of the holding back the shiur or monopolizing the shiur, due to the fact that a Talmid's das is katsara, and we don't know what the situation was back then in terms of the equivalent of tracks or levels within teaching environments. So for all I know, there could be students who are not on there's a huge gap between the top student and the lowest student.
So here's where I'm going to speculate a little.
Okay.
Which is that if all the talmidim are really exerting themselves, then you're not going to have as much of a gap of one student understands it right away and another student it takes 10 times to.
Yeah, I don't buy that. I'll tell you why. Because first of all, there is I'm trying to remember where the Rambam talks about this. I think it's in Shmona Prakim, but I could be mistaken. It might be in Pirkei Avos on the Mishnah about the 4 types of students: the sponge and the sieve and the funnel and the colander or whatever the other things are. Where the or maybe the one about that's the one about memory also, right? That there's students who retain everything, and the students who retain the good and they throw out they don't retain the unimportant stuff, and then there's the students who retain the unimportant stuff and then they throw out the good, and then there's students who don't remember anything. So I don't know if this is the Rambam, but someone on that says, what's the point in classifying students in this way, like in the other Mishnayos in Perek Chamishi, then there are actions that you can change. But how good your memory is something that you just naturally, like, either you have a good memory, you don't have a good memory, you know? So I think, okay, now I'm mixing up. I don't know if this is the Rambam who says this or someone else, but that like, you know, there is a reality to different dispositions for how far you can get in terms of certain things. And like, this is saying, like, you just have to work with whatever your disposition is, you know? And like, there are people, I know why I'm thinking that's the Rambam, because in Shmona Prakim, when he's talking about intellectual virtues and ethical virtues, he says that one of the intellectual virtues is quickness of apprehension. And he says, I believe that has a biological cause. You know, and this is again in the theory of the four humors. But if you have excess phlegm, you know, or your brain is moist, I forgot what the thing is, you know, then you just you process things slower. And no matter how hard you exert yourself, you're not going to get it as quickly as the guy with a dry brain, you know. And if you want to read an example of this, so the yeshiva used to have a copy of this. There's a book in English called My Uncle the Netziv. And I think it's one of the ones that was discontinued because people thought that like there were controversial things like how he would read the newspaper on Shabbos, you know. But the thing that I read in there that was inspiring to me, I read it my first year in yeshiva, is that I think the Netziv, what made him a great gadol was that he was extremely slow to understand. So he put in tons of work, and eventually he became a gadol. But like he said that, like, you know, it's just like, you know, he couldn't keep up with the people around him, and he was giving it his all. So that's why I don't buy what you're saying.
Okay, so I'm gonna pivot to something else.
Yeah.
That the other talmidim are still going to be getting something out of it. Like,
right.
It's not like it's not like let's say a history class.
Yeah.
Where it's like, let's say it's like a certain fact or something.
Yeah.
He just person just doesn't understand the fact.
Right.
He's repeating the fact until he gets it.
Yeah.
Like that's not how this
that's not how Omik halacha works.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So when he's repeating it, like other talmidim can still be thinking about what he's saying, like thinking about, let's say, the nuances of the different ways that he's presenting it.
Yeah.
And like, while like the slow Talmud might be getting, like, you know, like it might take him several times to get like the understanding of like the essence of what he's saying.
Yeah.
Like, they might see all the nuances of different ways.
Okay, good. That's the answer we came up with yesterday, but I'm glad to hear that you independently came up with it. And just to give an example, like this, I feel like has happened many times in Rav Pesach Shir when I was in Rav Pesach Shir. Yeah, that Rav Pesach, I mean, it's partially because Rav Pesach picks the hardest sugyas in Shas, you know, but I can't think, there were many times when like it would be a difficult shir. I cannot remember a single time when he would come back the next day, present it for clarity, and we wouldn't all gain. And that was a lot of negatives. But in other words, that by going over it another time from a different angle, everyone gains. The people who felt like they understood and the people who didn't understand it. You know, so I agree with you there. Yeah.
And like corollary to that, I've never had a time when someone asked a question in shir, and then he answered it, and then like I was like, oh, like, you know, I didn't gain from that.
Yeah. Yeah, there's always stuff to gain from if you're a good Talmid. Yeah.
Even when it was like something where I was like, oh, I knew what he was saying.
Yeah.
But then it was like, oh, but now I have a deeper understanding.
Right. Yeah. Okay, good. All right, I'm satisfied with this. The only thing which is still a question, not on the Rambam, but a question on society is like, you know, to what extent do we do this now? Because like we gave another example yesterday that like it does not seem to be the derech right now where like the Rav distances himself from the talmidim and like instills dread. And is that good or bad? You know? Yeah.
I guess never mind.
No, what?
I'm wondering what we mean by society. Although I also was saying that we were saying maybe my knowledge of a more black hat is not that strong and.
Right. Me, I'll modify the question. Societies. You know, like I do think there are many societies and many intellectual cultures around the Jewish world now, and I'm sure in certain places it still is like this. Yeah. I mean, I remember one time, I don't know which year it was. I want to say it was in Ner Yisrael. So one of my friends in yeshiva, like spent a Shabbos at Ner Yisrael and was in like the Rosh Yeshiva's Gemara shir, like he sat in on it, and like. The Rosh Yeshiva said something like my friend, like just like raise his hand and like ask a question, and like there's like a back and forth, and then like later on he asked another question, and then after the shiur, the guys in the shiur were like, "What are you doing asking questions? Like we don't ask questions, you know." And it was like he was coming from a different intellectual culture, and I guess in that culture, then you would you know, like reserve your questions or maybe ask like senior talmidim or something like that. I don't know. Yeah.
That was the thing in Shirley Mr. Family.
In what? Shirley Mr. Family? Yeah.
There's one more. He talked about when he was I think he was
Niels Bohr? Oh, go ahead.
No, this is in Brazil.
Okay.
So he was teaching a class and and no one asked questions.
Yeah.
Or like maybe someone asked a question like the first day or something like that.
Yeah.
And then no one asked questions.
Yeah.
He was trying to encourage them to ask questions and no one did. And
yeah.
Ended up talking to some of the students privately, and they said that they were whenever someone asked a question, then after people would be like what are you doing? You know, like wasting time by asking a question.
Right. Yeah. So, you know, fortunately, and then subsequently, unfortunately, then this is a problem that I used to face in Shalhevet, which was when new students, you know, typically ninth graders or transfer students would come into the school, they're not used to an environment where students ask questions and like challenge what the teacher says. And so with ninth grade classes, I would often have to like train them to have the courage to ask questions. And then the unfortunate thing is when Shalhevet closed and these students went to other schools, like they stood out as being exemplary in asking of their questions. And if there was a good teacher, the teacher would nourish it or would nurture it. But then in many cases, then they were just shut down because everyone around felt like it was inappropriate or wasting time or imprudent or something, you know, or impertinent, or what do you call it when you disrespect someone? What's the word I'm searching for? Impertinent? Impudent. Yeah, that's what I was searching for. Thank you. Yeah, it was impudent to ask questions. Okay.
So
yeah.
In terms of the balance, I think it does seem like there's just from my experience, it has been there's a good medium between going deep into answering on this question,
yeah,
but also not wasting time with someone who's not putting in enough effort.
Yeah, exactly. And I think there's a similar balance also. Maybe you can say in terms of my question about to what extent should this strategy be used in Halacha Hey 3 today or in our societies is anything that would impinge upon that balance. Meaning, if the Rav eating and drinking with the students or making jokes before shiur is going to make the students feel more comfortable being forthright with the Rav and saying that they don't understand something and asking questions, so then he should do these things. But in cases where it's going to cause them to be overly familiar and not take things seriously and not put in effort, then the Rav shouldn't do that. Yeah. Okay, good. All righty, let's go on to new halachos, new vistas. Okay, so now we get into actual procedures, okay, of the shiur dynamic. Halacha vav, ein sholin es harav kishi kanes lebeis midrash. We do not ask the Rav when he enters into the base midrash, meaning immediately upon entering, ad shetis yashiv dato alav, until his mind is settled, right? So you don't pounce on the Rav, as soon as he enters, right? Yeah. Okay, and we'll have to ask ourselves why on a macro and a micro level when we go through these, but I just want to get the macro first. So the Talmid, I think, right, shouldn't ask when the Talmid enters until he sits and rests. Okay, he doesn't need yishuv hadas apparently, right? He just needs to catch his breath. I don't know what he's yeshiv yanuach. Sounds like physically, right? Like he sits and then rests, right? Not psychologically. The Rav, it sounds like psychologically. Yashiv dato.
I haven't thought about this.
Okay. The ein sholin shnaim ke'echad. Two people shouldn't ask at the same time, right? So that seems like yeah.
Ask at the same time or ask the same question together.
Oh, I think sholin ke'echad. Good question. I think at the same time. I don't know why though. Let me read the next one and see if that sheds light. Ve'ein sholin es harav me'inyan acher ela no, it doesn't shed light. Why wouldn't they be able? I don't know. Ke'echad as one. Makes, I hear both ways. Yeah.
Both of them make sense to me, but I think, just talking about the two people asking one question together.
Yeah.
Is that oftentimes what happens is they have slightly different questions.
Yeah.
And then the Rav is going to be trying to answer two, like have the same phenomenon of trying to answer two questions.
Mhm.
You know.
Uh-huh. I hear that. I think there's actually a way to answer the question of what he means is later on. Oh, see, here's an interesting thing. So in halacha ches 1, he goes through the procedures of shnayim sheshalu. If two people ask questions, then he tells you which one to pay attention to, and he does not use the phrase ke'echad. So I think halacha ches 1 is how I was saying it, is they ask at the same time. So this must be the way Yosef was saying it, that they ask. How did you say it? Shnayim ke'echad?
Is that they're asking the same question, like asking together?
Right, asking together the. But see, my intuition is telling me it's like what you're saying, right?
Ches 1 is actually about two different questions.
Ches 1 is about two different questions, right? This one is about the same ish question, right? But I think you have to say the ish, right? Because if it's exactly the same question, I don't think it means that he has to like say, okay, you go into another room, I'm going to answer you, and then like you can come in and So I think it must mean like asking about the same thing together. And it's because what you're saying is like
different people are going to be asking like different ways. They don't realize it, or like.
Oh, you know if the shnayim has to be referring to people? Could the shnayim be
shadim? Yeah.
No, I was gonna say questions. Could shnayim be questions?
Oh yeah, duh. I think that's right. Can't ask two questions at the same time. Yeah, that correct. That makes a lot more sense.
You can't ask two questions.
Yeah. Okay, good. That's a much cleaner read. Okay, good. All right, that's good. So you shouldn't they shouldn't ask the Rav on another topic other than the one that they're involved in, so that he does not become embarrassed, right? So that's interesting also, right? That you ask him about the localized topic. Now, this is one, okay, well, we'll refrain for a second. V'yesh l'Rav lahatos, oh, this is a funny one. V'yesh l'Rav lahatos hatalmidim b'she'elosav uv'ma'asim she'osin b'ifnehem k'dei l'chadadan u'k'dei she'yeda im zochrin hein ma shalimdan or einan zochrin. So the Rav is allowed to mislead the talmidim. Yeah, I was trying to make a joke. I was going to try to translate this in a way that was like false, but I couldn't think of it in time. The Rav, the Rav is allowed to. Yeah, the Rav is allowed to cause the students to make a mistake, or mislead the students. I think is a better translation with his questions and with his actions that he does in front of them. That's a dangerous thing. In order to sharpen them, and in order to know whether they remember. What they learned or whether they don't remember. Okay. So like, eating a cheeseburger in front of them. No, obviously you can't do something usher, but like, I think that's what he means though in actions of like, demonstrating something in a way, like let's say, I mean, this first thing that comes to mind, like let's say like you're learning about kamitza in the avoda, like he could do it in a different way and like see if there's any reactions and be like, come on guys, you should have like spotted that,
There's a story in the Gemara about this.
Yeah.
So it was, I think, so there was someone who got up and said, like, God had like mercy on us, like he has mercy on the mother bird.
Yeah.
And like Rabbi got up and was like, it was a great thing that you said. And then Abaya's like, what are you talking about?
It's over Mishnah, yeah.
And then he's like, yeah, I was just testing you.
That's good. That's a good example. And then last one, and then we'll go back. Interesting. He can ask them, he has the permission to ask them about something that they're not involved in order to motivate them. Lazarzan, I don't know how you say motivate them. I get, yeah. The Rambam Bekius says, Lazarzan, so that they'll learn other stuff. Like, again, the first times I see any of these things in real life is what sticks with me the most. And for me, it was we were learning Ketzah Mevarchim in Rav Pesach's Gemara Shir, and I forgot how he said it. All I remember was him raging at us. I don't think he was actually angry. That no one, it was something like no one knew that it was some gardening practice. Okay, some gardening practice that was like standard thing that every gardener knows, and like no one in the shiur knew it. And he's like, you guys know nothing about growing plants, and it became like this was before memes existed. It became like a meme of like the guys in the shiur of like how like we're total amayars when it comes to like learning about plants. Like we better like learn how to grow stuff so that like Pesach doesn't like get mad at us, and like, but it did stimulate us to like realize like, oh yeah, we have no knowledge of like how stuff grows, and it motivated us to learn that. Okay, so let's go back, bird's eye view. What's the deal with these halachos here? And I'm going to go ahead and answer that question by positing something here. Okay, I'm going to posit something, which is you see that there are different things we're concerned about. What are they? Yishuv of the das of the Rav. Okay. Menuchas hadas of the Talmid, whatever that is, and not hadas, but like the right, whatever reason we want the Talmud to sit. It's funny, he doesn't give a reason for ein sholim shnaim ke'echad, right? Not asking two questions at once. Not embarrassing the Rav. Just 1 second. Testing the students and then motivating them. So I'm gonna posit something here, which is that these are just examples of things that the Chazal called attention to for these considerations. But these, I want to say that these are all examples of things that the Rav and the students should strive for, even beyond these particular examples. Yes.
You're saying he, in specific, didn't give a reason for the Shnaim Ke'echad, but which of the previous ones did he give a reason for?
All of them.
What? How?
Ad shetis yashiv dato, right?
How's that a reason? That's an until X, not
Yeah,
a reason.
it is a reason also. Why shouldn't you ask the Rav when he first enters? Because his das is not miyushav, right? Or why shouldn't you ask, in an area that he's not involved in, because that would embarrass him.
I really, the following one was the reason for the previous two. I guess I now see what you're saying about reasons, but
right, like I'll give you an example of this. Right, it says when he first enters into the base midrash. I would also say you shouldn't ask the Rav a question right before he davens, even though the Rambam doesn't say that, but his mind is going to, like, when it's shkia, I got to, or you shouldn't ask the Rav this when his dead is resting before him. Like there's a lot of other examples, but it's interesting. This is like derech eretz in questions and answers, really, right? In question and answer, yeah.
Maybe for the Shnaim Ke'echad, the reason is not part of has a much less bearing on the Ma'aseh that for the you can't ask a site for a different iyun if we're talking about a girl who's memorized everything.
Yeah, right.
But for the Shnaim Ke'echad,
that's for everyone.
That's for everyone, and that it's maybe bad for you and
right. It isn't just to do Rambam Bekius here. Isn't the Rambam's definition of a great chacham or something like that someone who you can ask a question in any area? What? Why did my Mahler start playing? Hold on.
What is that?
Mahler's Eighth Symphony. I don't know why it started playing. That's what I was listening to on the way over. Yeah, I was like,
you did this. You did this.
No, seriously.
Okay,
No, seriously.
Yeah. What levels of music we're trying to remember?
Yeah. So this is on קידושין al Tanai. That's so funny. קידושין al Tanai. Oh wait. Tzaddik Gamor. Yeah. So yeah. So if you, I think this is the halacha here. Oh no, here we go. So this is on all the cases of קידושין al Tanai. If you're Mekadosh Isha al Manas Shani Talmid, okay, so on the condition that I am a Talmid, right? So ein omrim keben azai u keben zoma. We don't say that, oh, that must mean that you have to be on the level of ben azai ben zoma. I don't know what kind of hafmin it is. Ella kol shesholin oso davar echad b'talmud b'omro. Rather, any Talmid where you can ask him something in his learning and he'll tell you. Even the easy halachos that they review before the chag, so that they'll remember it, close to the chag, so that people will be experts in them. So in other words, if he can't do that, then he's not a Talmid, and the קידושין is not a chal, and if he can, then it is. If he says, that he's Makadish her almanas, that he is that he's a chacham. We don't say like Rabbi Akiva and his contemporaries. El kosher sholin oso davar chachma b'chol makom v'omer. If you can ask him anything, any dvar chachma in any area, and he'll tell you, right? So that's like Rav Pesach. Yeah.
So what is like the parameters of that? Because in order to be able to answer any question in any area, then you need to know everything, which is like.
It's a good question, right? I mean, when he says b'chol makom ve'omer, I don't know if it necessarily means that he has to be able to know the answer, but he'll be able to respond, like intelligently about it, like, and you see people like, I mean, the best example of this I know of, I mean, I'm sure this is true of like our Rebbeim, but like Rabbi Yaakov Trachman, any conversation I've ever seen him in, it could be something that he has absolutely no knowledge about. His mind is such that he will be able to just immediately engage in a very deep conversation and master all the fundamentals and just start like he'll know what questions to ask and he'll just become like an expert in the area, like in 5 minutes. That's hyperbole, but not so much hyperbole. Yeah. So that's what made me say this about what you said. Oh yeah. That this thing that the Rambam is saying about you can only ask him in the area he's involved in, that obviously wouldn't apply to someone who's a chacham in all areas, in kol Torah kula or whatever. But the ein sholim shnaim ke'echad, you never do that. You should never do that. Yeah.
So I actually have a thought about it. Maybe goes against that.
Okay.
So I think what like this paragraph is addressing is like a certain, I don't know if pristineness is the right word, but I'm going to use that. The relationship between like the way that like the Talmud learns from the Rav.
Mm-hmm.
And I think if let's say you ask a question from the Rav when he first enters the basement, then he's not going to be able to like the way that that dynamic works is he's not going to be able to take the time to like craft like a good response.
Yeah.
Because like being bombarded. I know because I got reprimanded for doing that.
Yeah.
Also for the second one.
Yeah.
I think actually the second one is the same thing.
Yeah, you're not gonna be able to. Oh, sorry. Go ahead.
No, I was thinking for the wrong. Also, if you're coming, if like the Talmud is coming in and asking a question, then it's like the question's like coming at the wrong. In like a certain sort of way that is like doesn't lend itself well to like discourse.
Interesting. So I definitely hear that. I thought for the Talmud thing is that in the imagery that you awakened in my mind here, like the Talmud like dashing in and like asking the Rav and like is catching his breath. That it's not a good way for the Talmud to ask the question because the Talmud's not gonna be able to process what the Rav is saying. Yeah. And I got that from the Yanuach. He has to rest. Yeah. The resting part does not seem to be relevant from the Rav standpoint. Yeah.
I was thinking more just to totally stop and think this question is stupid.
Say it again.
Stop and think this question is stupid.
But that doesn't have to do with entering the base midrash. That's in general. The Talmud should think before he asks. I think this is davka like kishi kanes the base midrash, right? Meaning like even in shiur, the Talmud should think before he asks. Okay. Yeah. So I agree with you. I just don't agree that that's the reading of this. Also, I think it goes without saying that the Rav has the right to be mochel on these things. And I don't think that he needs to say that because a human being can be mochel on these things. Like if I like whenever any of us do Q&A, we're saying you can ask us about anything. We're not saying, it has to be Q&A only on the stuff we're doing in shiur. So like I think that is you could be mochel. Yeah.
Just for these things aren't these kavod Torah?
So I don't think these are kavod Torah. I think these are this is not a din and kavod. I think if it were din and kavod, the Rambam would put it in the halachos about kavod harav. Yeah.
So also I was thinking based on the way I was understanding this paragraph. I think even if let's say the Rambam is a chacham that you ask him anything, then there's a certain like at least something that's better about asking specifically about something that you're learning, and that he's learning, because then you're gonna get an answer that's more clearly refined, because it's like the area that he's been involved in.
Yeah, correct. I have a better word for you. So I think the intuition you were picking up on that made you say kavod. So I think I'm right. Halachically, if it were kavod, it would be in the other two, the prakim. But etiquette would be the word for this. Etiquette is like customs of decorum. And it's decorum, it's covered in the sense of decorum, but not like midin kavod hara from like, of hadar b'nei zaken, mipnei sevet takum hadar b'nei zaken.
I was trying to capture what I said pristine.
Yeah, right. Okay, that's good. Yeah, decorum is a good word for the pristine word. Yeah. Okay. Anything else we need to do here? I think it is interesting, by the way. Does that remind you of any other halacha of the Rav doing something in order to like sharpen, something weird to get to sharpen the student?
Seder?
Yeah, Seder, right? So it is a very similar thing. It's not the same wording, obviously, but like, in the Seder, the father has to do stuff to get the kid to ask. And I think that is also, it's not, when I first read this, I thought it was just kind of like an assessment strategy, of like seeing if they remember what he learned or seeing if they understand. But I think it's also training him in a good midah, which is if you see your Rav say or do something that like seems false or wrong, you should have the courage to be able to ask about it, and whenever the Rav does this, he's training the students to respond that way. I'm not saying that that's what the Rambam is saying. I'm just saying that's like a benefit that comes from this. Yeah.
When you were first meeting her, it seemed like you were gonna like talk about like what we do, like what societies do nowadays.
Was I? I think all I was going to say was, I think I was just going to make that point that this is not a rigid list, that it extends beyond and is like malleable, but it's based on these values which are rigid. Yeah.
I feel like for most of the stuff, Barnes Study Mayor's doesn't even have a havmina for most of this.
Yeah, I know. I think it's not an actual logical havamina. I think it is more like a decorum or etiquette havamina.
Modern society does not even lend itself to that.
Oh, modern society. Yeah, correct. Yeah.
And in the sense that I guess there's a Jewish system in modern society systems and Jewish system you might have a desire to do this, but in modern society, if you see your teacher in the grocery store, you're probably not asking him about stuff.
Right. Yeah. I feel like maybe in some areas, then professors still maintain a certain parallel set of etiquette for themselves in this way. There was one more point here. There is a havmina of this last one, I think. Maybe. I mean, I know he says Ein Tzarech Lomar, so maybe not. But like, I could see a havmina that maybe the Rav does not have the right to ask the students a question in an area that is foreign to them because he might embarrass them, but it's saying that if he's doing it in order to motivate them to learn the area, then that's fine. Yeah. Okay. Next, more etiquette. Ein sholin me'omed. You cannot, okay, we definitely don't hold by these nowadays. We don't ask while standing. Ve'ein meshivin me'omed, and we don't answer while standing. V'lo migavoa, and not while you're on high, like on a ladder. V'lo mirachok, and not when you're far away. Yeah.
Weren't we learning earlier about how in past days it used to be everyone was standing? That's
funny. Yeah. So I guess he must here mean in the current society, right? Meaning in the olden days, then the students would stand, right? But now he must mean like now. That's a good point though. And not mirachok, not from a distance. Yeah. Oh yeah. So he said, we have a name for him now, by the way. Rav Makbili. Yeah, that's his name. Yeah. Ein sholin me'omed kishuhu omed, when he is standing. V'nira shemedubar lo b'beis hamidrash ela b'pegisha akra'is b'rchov. That makes sense. That you shouldn't ask him while standing like in a marketplace when you happen to encounter him. But it's not talking about the beis midrash. Ulai eno merukaz v'alu litos b'teshuvah. So maybe he's not, I think, focused, and he's likely to make a mistake in his answer. Meaning, like not al regel achas and not even al regel shnayim. It has to be sitting. This is like a sit down conversation, right? That's the type of thing. And then okay, fine. Okay, and then merachok lomi achrei haskanim, not behind elders. Okay, let's read what Rambam Bekius says. Efshar shalkavana klalis. It's possible that he has a general intent here. She'ein derech kavod sheyishal es harav kishu omed acharav. That in general, it's not a derech kavod to ask the Rav when he is behind him. Shelo lahatricho lahafnos es rosho lachor, to not burden him by turning his head to behind him. Ach efshar shalkavana lezakenim hayoshim karov l'Rav b'shura rishona. Oh, this resonates with me. He says it's also possible that you shouldn't ask zakenim that his kavana is when the zakenim are sitting near the Rav in the front row, and it is people who it's proper to stand before, so that they should also hear your question. So I've been in this situation before. You've probably been in this situation before also. Sometimes I have a question just for Rav Pesach. Like, let's say it's like a shaila, but it has to do with something we were doing in shiur. So it's kind of like a shiur question, but then Rebbe is there sitting next to him. I feel like it is not b'derech kavod to ask a question to Rav Pesach that by all rights, I should be asking to Rebbe. Even if there's like real rational reasons I should ask it to Rav Pesach. That's what I got when he said me'achorei hazakenim. Like you've got the zakenim there, and you've got your Rav, and you're asking the Rav something in the presence of the zakenim. I think that's like, that fits better than, I don't think, like the thing he said before, asking behind the Rav, and then he goes, "You made me turn my head? How dare you?" I just, that's not mashma to me. And what else? V'in sholin es harav ela b'inyan. Didn't we say that already? You should only ask the Rav on topic. V'ein sholin ela miyira. You should only ask out of fear. V'lo yishal b'inyan yaser mishalosh halachos. That's a good rule. You shouldn't ask more than 3 questions on one topic, more than 3 halachos. This is interesting stuff. So what's the difference? I want to know what's the difference between this paragraph and the previous paragraph. Yeah.
So one topic, more halachos, is it as in 3 halachos within a topic, or a question which involves 3 halachos?
I think within a topic fits in better with what he's saying. Okay. Like let's say you have a sheila on borer, so you ask him about your sheila, and then you follow up with another question and another follow up. Don't do a 4th follow up, or a 3rd follow, whatever. Don't do 4. Like there's a, like there is, and that is I said this resonates with me. There is a certain thing where people who are not experienced asking questions, you can tell that what they're really asking for is they're asking for a whole shiur. And like the Rav's not going to give you a shiur when you're asking questions. There's a difference between asking individual questions and a shiur, and that the quantity is 3. Yeah. But what would these questions do? These halachos feel different than the previous one. But some of the, like at the end, seems to go back to ein sholin. What's the difference between ein sholin es harav ela b'inyan versus ein sholin es harav me'inyan acher ela me'oso ha'inyan shehin oskin bo kedei shelo yizbayesh. Right? It's weird. Oh, Rambam Bekius says something. Let's see that. Ein sholin es harav ela b'inyan she'talmid yihyeh memukad b'halachos mesuyamos hanilmados b'shir. That the student will be memukad, these modern Hebrew words, in halachos, in specific halachos that were learned in shiur. She'im heim lomdim al hotza'a mirshus l'rshus b'Shabbos shelo yishal b'inyan muksa b'Shabbos uchadome. Just look at memukad. Mukad is like a pyre, right? Like ahal mukda, amizbeach tamid.
Maybe it's like stacked on top of one. But they're actually there.
That's a good theory. Mimokad.
The previous thing was not a completely different area.
Mm-hmm. It's related, like a related area? Yeah. So mimokad is not in here, but let's look at mokad. Mokad is focused. Okay. Oh, it means focus, center, fire, or hearth. Yeah. Yeah. All right. So let's think about this for next time, or I guess next week. Today's Thursday? What happened? Oh, we had a tinus. That made the time feel weird.
Yeah.
Yeah. And well, we also missed one Rambam Bekius shiur. So that also made it feel like I thought we had one more going for this week, and I realized no. Okay, so let's put it on pause here. All right, that was interesting. I'm glad you were able to come, Isaac.
Yeah.
Yeah.